Dragon Ballers, if you're looking to buy Dragon Ball Super or One Piece sealed product, make sure to get 5% off using my link to Mystic TCG down in the description. You can also sell cards to them using their Facebook link, which is also down in the description. Yo, what's going on, One Piecers? Welcome back to another video. First video of 2023, and it's a One Piece video. Can you guys even believe it? Don't worry though, we're gonna still do a healthy mix of DBS and One Piece here on the channel. I have been having a lot of fun with One Piece as of late. We're kind of in the DBS off season, so until things pick back up for Dragon Ball Super, I'll be playing a lot of One Piece. But I'll also be covering Dragon Ball, of course. You know, the Zenkai reveals, we still have to pick those up, and set 20 of Dragon Ball is being revealed as we speak. So we'll be doing videos on all that stuff, but I am, getting into One Piece, so I figure it's time to start covering on the channel. What I'm probably gonna do typically moving forward is probably do One Piece later in the week, probably like Fridays and Saturdays, except for a video like this. This is going to be a meta breakdown, meta analysis, and those of you guys coming from DBS watching this, you guys know the deal. Generally, I receive feedback. These videos are pretty helpful for people, so what we're going to do is we're going to go over the format of this tournament, talk about the decks, talk about the roles of the decks in the meta, talk about some top cut deck lists. Again, people generally find this stuff pretty helpful, so if you guys are new to One Piece, especially the competitive side, this is probably going to be pretty informative for you. And yeah, like I said, One Piece is probably going to normally be the later ends of the week, except for a meta breakdown, because I think it's just better for players to get their eyes in the meta as fast as possible. This is when the data is most relevant, it's fresh, and it's important to get you guys going so you guys can tweak your decks throughout the week, tailor your playtesting, all that good stuff. But anyways, we'll get into this. But first, if you guys are new here, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you never miss a video. Anyways, let's jump right on in. So it's a tournament that took place over the weekend, or probably a few days before the weekend because the weekend was the holiday, but that took place in Italy. Shout out to my Italian brethren over there. So we are going over this. This is the One Piece card game Pirates Party Tournament. It was a total of 32 players. Now, I know this is not a huge number of players or anything, but let's be honest, we haven't had a huge One Piece tournament yet, at least on the western side of the world. So this is going to be something just to kind of warm us up, ease into going over meta breakdowns, myself included, like getting me used to talking about the One Piece meta. But I think this month we actually had the first suspected big tournament for the game. That's going to be at TCG Con in Texas, which I believe is hosted by PPG. Great tournament organizer. If you haven't been out to a PPG tournament, I strongly recommend it. I believe it's a 1K unless it's a cap, and it could potentially be a 5K. More information, I'm sure, is on ppgeventmanagement.com. I'm sure that tournament is going to cap, by the way, because One Piece has seemingly been quite popular over the last month and a couple weeks. So that could be a really, really big tournament. But for now, this is what we got. And it's in another country, so it's always interesting to see what other regions are doing with the metagame, right? All right, so here we go. We have 32 players, and Kid takes up 28% of the overall room. Now, here's the thing with Kid. Kid is what we call a mid-range deck. If you guys are into competitive card games, a mid-range deck is something that sits in between aggro, which are your faster, more aggressive decks, and then we have your control decks, which are kind of late game, kind of try to dictate what your opponent's able to do, and mid-range kind of sits right smack dab in the middle of that. A mid-range deck is typically able to pivot to aggro if it needs to, or control if it needs to. Now, I'm getting a bit ahead of myself, but for example, if I'm playing Kid, which I play a lot of, I have a lot of content here on the channel for the Kid deck specifically, so I can speak to this with a fair amount of expertise. If I'm playing Kid up against the Zoro deck, Zoro is pretty much purely an aggro deck, so I want to pivot to a bit more of the control player in that matchup as the Kid deck. If I'm playing against Kaido, Kaido's a really, really strong control deck. It has a better late game than Kid, so I'm going to want to pivot to more of an aggressive beatdown strategy, because the longer the game goes, theoretically, the more advantaged Kaido will become, right? So that's kind of the definition of a mid-range deck, and Kid is, if you've been following the Japanese meta, it is a really good deck in set 1 format. It is the mid-range deck, I would say. It's very popular, wins several events over there, and I don't think that's going to be any different over here, except Kid does not win this event, though. The winner of this event is a rather interesting one that we'll talk about later. But yeah, we have Kid here taking up a very large slot, the largest slot of representation as a mid-range deck. So what mid-range decks do well, this is important to know if you want to pick this up. I don't think mid-range decks are great for beginners, because mid-range decks generally reward format knowledge, and if this is your first time really looking at a meta for a card game, Kid is probably not going to be your best pick, because you don't have the best understanding of the meta yet. Maybe after this video you'll have a better understanding. You can try the Kid deck. Again, I got a lot of content on the channel here for playing Kid, so you can learn pretty quick. But yeah, Kid and mid-range decks are very good at rewarding you for understanding the format, because again, it rewards you for knowing your matchups and knowing how to play accordingly. When you're playing a deck like Zoro, when you're playing a deck like Kaido, for the most part, you're doing the same things. Kaido, ramp, play a bomb, etc. Zoro, attack with everything you possibly can, because it's an aggro deck. Kid's a little bit different, but I hope I gave you guys a good definition of a mid-range deck. Next up, we have Kaido taking up the next most representation in this room. Kaido, like I said before, is a control deck. It's got the highest end bombs in the game. It's the only deck in the game that has a true board wipe. It's also the deck in the game that has the most just pure spot removal. It can kill 5 drops. It can kill 4 drops. It can kill a 2 and a 3 with 1 king. You can have a lot of board removal with Kaido, which I'll be honest, this is my one gripe with One Piece. It's kind of unbalanced when in a Summoning Sickness game, a deck has so much easy removal, because you got to keep in mind, a 6-drop is not really a 6-drop if you come from like Magic or even Dragon Ball. A 6-drop in this game is really a 3-drop, right? So having that to kill things that can't even attack yet, kind of OP. But the reason why Kaido is not over the top broken is because Kaido is really only as good as its opening is, like its draws are, as weird as that sounds, because like I said, Kaido has the stickiest, the beefiest bombs in the game, but sometimes you don't open your ramp pieces. Sometimes you open all bombs, no ramp. Sometimes you open all defense, no bombs. Sometimes you open all defense, no ramp, and then your hand just look very, very awkward. Purple does have a lot of 2k counters at their disposal. I think it has more than most of the other colors. It has access to potentially playing 16 2k counters. I know for a fact blue only has 12. I think green might also only have 12. Red might also have 16, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But yeah, purple has a lot of them, but it also plays a lot of cards that don't have counter power. Most of the bombs in Kaido don't have counter. So again, if you're stuck with a huge hand of just bombs and you drew rather unfortunately, you just might be taking damage. Might be nothing you can do about that. But also to counteract that, I mean, I don't think it's going to happen super often if Kaido is built properly, because you also have incredible event counter cards, right? You have Blast Breath, which is a 1 Dawn 4k counter. That is insanely value when you consider that most other event counters are 1 cost 2k counters. So 1 cost 4k at the cost of losing 1 Dawn, that's barely a cost, because the next turn you're just going to get 2 Dawn back, right? And if you already have Onigashima on board, you're accelerating your Dawn already. That's not even a worry, because you've just been accelerating your Dawn throughout the whole game. So that's kind of the thing. Kaido is kind of at the mercy of how well it opens, because if you don't hit Onigashima, you're in a bit of a rough spot. But you can still recover pretty well. I've seen tons of games won by Kaido where they don't open their field card. It's just you got to play a little bit differently, play a little bit smarter. But yeah, Kaido, very, very strong control deck. Next up with the most highly repped percentage in third place is Doflamingo. This is interesting because when it comes to blue, I hear a lot of polarizing opinions. I hear some people say blue is incredible, one of the top 3 meta decks, and I hear other people say blue is absolute trash. Now, me personally, Dofi is the most fun deck for me to play. I genuinely enjoy playing Kid because I think it's really strong, it rewards my playstyle, and I do like it, but Dofi for me is the most fun deck to play in set 1, but I've seen it fall short in a lot of matchups. Like, I've taken games from Kaido. I don't know if it's necessarily favored for blue, but it's winnable. I've taken games off Zoro. I think Kid is a little bit difficult to beat, depending on how the Kid player plays it. But yeah, blue, I do think it's popular because I think Dofi's a popular character. I think it's a very fun deck to play. I think a lot of people really enjoy the gimmick because a lot of the other decks in set 1 don't really revolve around gimmicks as much as Dofi does. And that can be very fun for a lot of players. A lot of players do like their archetypes. A lot of the people like just making the best decks they can out of generic cards. Lots of different playstyles throughout a metagame. But Dofi is very fun. I am surprised, though, that it takes up so much of this, player representation. Then we have Zoro, your tried and true aggro deck. You're just playing rush cards, which you're the only color in the game that has rush besides 1 card in purple, as far as I'm aware. Or maybe 2 cards of purple, but no one really plays the other queen. Anyways, yeah, Zoro, really aggressive, really fast, generally swinging for 6k or higher, which is going to demand your opponent to have a lot of 2ks. You kind of set the pace of the game when you play Zoro, and it's up to your opponent to really just outlast your offense, and they'll hope you run out of steam. But I've seen good Zoro players just really not run out of steam all the way up until the end of the game, right? And then we have 1 Law here, or it looks like 2 Law rather, and 1 red Luffy. So with 2 Law is an interesting kind of combo deck. I'd also kind of say Dofi's a combo deck, and what I mean by a combo deck is you're looking to pull off a very specific play with a certain combination of cards, and if you can do that, that's generally going to reach you towards your win condition, right? Dofi's is stacking top of its deck with Perona or the 3-drop Dofi and then playing cards that way. That's sort of like your combo, but it's really just your way to establish board. Law wants to fill the board full of character cards and then use its leader ability to bounce back a character, play usually a 5-cost character for 2, cheating that out in a way, getting extra value onto the board by spending less Dawn, right? So it is a bit gimmicky. It is sometimes tough to pull off, again, especially because decks like Kaido and even stuff like Dofi have removal for your small stuff. so it can be kind of hard to play Law effectively. I think it takes a lot of practice to get really good with Law. And then we have starter deck Luffy, which manages to do very well in this tournament. It's another red deck, right? So keep in mind, rolling set 1, Luffy is sharing a lot of cards with Zoro, but it's playing a bit differently. It's almost like a bit of a mid-range, like slower version of Zoro, because you know, you don't automatically stack up your guys as high as Zoro does, because just for 1 Don, your leader in Zoro, you boost your whole board by 1k. Luffy doesn't quite do that, but Luffy can give Donna things that are already used, so you can get more value out of the Don you have in your pool, whereas Zoro gets more value out of just 1 Don, if that kind of makes sense. In Luffy, you can tap a lot of Don, equip those rest of Don to your leader, tap the rest of Don to other characters, and of course you have the Nami does the same thing as leader, basically equipping rest of Don to your various characters, right? So that's kind of the spread of what these decks do. I'll just go quick and, you know, give you guys what I think are the advantages and disadvantages in matchups. As far as Kid goes, I think it's usually pretty advantage into Zoro. You typically have the solid defenses you need to outlast their aggression. Kaido can be rather tough. Again, it depends how well Kaido opens, but if they're just sticking bombs, it's going to be really hard for you to, you know, kill them through that, because those bombs are going to go straight to your face and force you to use most of your hand. You got to rely on your 7-drop blocker and your 8-drop Kid in that matchup. Kaido wants to go late game, so generally it's gonna theoretically struggle against Zoro, which can go very fast at it, but I've seen Kaido beat Zoro plenty of times. It really just depends, again, how the Kaido opens and how it navigates the Zoro matchup, but generally should be unfavored. And against Kid, kind of just talked about that. Zoro should do well into Kaido, again, depending on how Kaido opens. I know I said that 4 million times, but it really is a really big factor how well Kaido opens or doesn't open. And then into Kid, again, if you're a really good Zoro player and you know how to like manage your resources almost perfectly, you can do perfectly fine against Kid. I'm not saying Kid auto beats Zoro or anything, but against a Zoro player who really does just turn everything sideways and doesn't give much regard to anything else, Kid is probably going to turn up you know, pretty successful in that matchup. Dofi, I think, does well into red because you have a really great answer to Nico Robin in the form of Marshall D. Teach. If you're able to, you know, get Marshall D. Teach off the top 5 with Perona and set that up, you're probably in a really good spot. Problem is, the deck size is rather large and the draw power is rather low in the game, so your ability to see Teach is not going to be ultra uber consistent, but the games you do, you should be in a pretty good spot against red. Against green, I think Dofi can struggle a bit if the green player plays it well, and the reason I say that is blue has a great answer to Kid's 7-drop in the form of Mihawk or Doflamingo. Does not have as good of an answer to Kid's 8-drop. You're really just hoping to stack a lot of Dawn and swing at the 8-drop rather than like actually removing it with effects, so that can be a little bit rough. And then Luffy, to be honest, I don't have a ton of experience playing the deck. I've played against it a handful of times at locals. I'd approach it rather similar to how I approach Zoro. And then Law, if you can keep Law's board clear, they're going to kind of struggle, because if they don't have a full board, they don't have a leader effect, and then they're just a vanilla leader with 4 life, right? So that's kind of a funny way you can look at it. But on the flip side of that, if you're not able to clear Law's board, or they just have the excess amount of 1-drops to get a full board early on, they can pop off Wombo Combo and start putting a lot of pressure on. So generally that's how I look at the format here. Let's look at some of the topping lists for this event. All right, so 2nd, 3rd, and 4th are all Kid decks, which is kind of makes sense because of how much representation Kid had in the format. So we'll go through this kind of quickly. I'll just point out some things that I find interesting. So the first row here, pretty standard. Going into the second row, the Yamato SCR is a very interesting choice. I know a lot of people don't really play this card because it's very difficult to use, and the reason is it's got very powerful keywords in banish and double attack. Basically, it can just drop 2 of your opponent's life to the trash, which is really strong. But the problem with this game is summoning sickness, so that's going to be pretty hard to resolve. Like, a couple things. One, depending on matchup, your opponent can possibly just kill the card before you ever get a chance to swing with it. 2, you can be in a little bit of a rough spot if your opponent establishes blockers on the next turn. 1 blocker is probably not a big deal because you have plenty of effects in the deck that can just rest a blocker and then swing past it, but if they play 2 or 3 blockers in the next turn, that might be tough for your Yamato to actually get some value. Going along, we have the restanding Law from the starter deck. This restands a Supernova card, I believe costs 5 or less. If this restood any Supernova, that would be absolutely busted because you can restand the 8-drop, restand 7-drop, but with this card, you're typically going to restand your other Law, you're going to restand your Basil Hawkins, which is actually really solid. Restand X-Drake, so you've got some plays there that just offer you extra aggression, right? If you need the one final push attack, the restanding Law can get you there, but I think a lot of times your leader just does the same thing better, just attacking twice with a loaded amount of Dawn. I think usually just does it better, but I could be wrong. Going on to the bombs, though, only 2 7-drops. I'm very surprised at this. I think it's really interesting. I think that the 7-drop is a really great card. I don't think I would play less than 3. Blue can answer it pretty effectively, so I can see wanting to cut down on it for the blue matchup if blue is popular in your area. But if blue is not popular in your area, I don't see you playing any less than 3 of this. I mean, it's hard for a lot of other decks to answer it. Like Kaido has to board wipe if they want to kill it. Red has to Otama Jet Pistol, which costs them 2 cards. So yeah, that's an interesting choice in my opinion. Then we have the 8-drop kid, just an insane boss monster. This comes down, you're kind of starting to take control of the game. And then for the events, 2 Paradise Waterfall, 2 Punk Gibson, 2 Straw Sword. This is why I really wish the game had a side deck. Hopefully it gets announced at some point in the future, because even in set 1, there are a lot of cards that would be really, really good in the sideboard. Like Straw Sword, I think is a great card. Maybe not main deck though. Like I think it's good against Kaido, rest their queen, going for the attack, that kind of stuff. But I don't know, general use case, it's hard to justify maining 2, but if it worked out for this player, that's pretty cool. All right, 3rd place, we have another kid list. Going back real quick, this list did not play Momonosuke. That's interesting. So going on to 3rd place, we are playing Momonosuke. We're playing the thick Wano lineup, and this list is a lot more streamlined. We're playing just a lot of 4 and 3 ofs. Notice the 4 of Law that bounces a card back to your hand on play. You can do a lot of cool stuff with that. You can play Cat Viper, bounce it back to your hand with Law to use it again later, or use it again instantly. You can swing with Okiku, play Law, play Okiku again to put it in active mode to prevent it from being attacked on your opponent's turn. You can do a lot of cool stuff with that. You can play Izu, which is one of your 2k counters in a pinch, and then Law can bounce it back to your hand. So this is a pretty cool build. And then 3 on the boss monsters, I do like that lineup. Paradise Waterfall is a card that I'm liking a little bit less and less. It is in my current deck profile here on the channel, and I do still like it at 2, but I think it's only super solid when you have blockers established. But in this build where you're playing 4 Law and 3 of the 7-drop kid, does seem to make a lot of sense to me. And then we have the 2nd place kid list. Going through this, looks pretty similar to the last one. Look at the inclusion of 2 Beppo though. I do really like that inclusion, because I do like the number of 10 2k counters. I would like to play 10. I'm currently at 9 on my current list. I'm messing around with ways to bump it up to 4, because a lot of times when you drop your 8-drop kid, it's all about defending it. So having more 2Ks in hand does feel quite nice for that. And then the event card lineup here, Paradise Waterfall, Punk Gibson. Punk Gibson, I'm noticing, is a card that does seem to help a lot in defending the 8-drop kid if you play it correctly, because typically when you play the 8-drop kid, you don't have the same or the correct number of Dawn to use Punk Gibson that turn, but it's like the next turn Punk Gibson can do a really good job of defending your 8-drop kid if it lived the first turn, right? So that does seem pretty solid. And 2 7-drops again, which I guess probably is a concession to blue. Now, 1st place here, we have Red Luffy. Now, I know a lot of people that would just say Zoro is better than Luffy. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on that. But again, it's just all about what Luffy does a bit differently. So for the 1st row here, pretty standard seeming lineup. 4 Sanji is definitely a lot. I mean, it's 2k counter, so that might just be the purpose of it. But it is actually a good card aggressively, right? Like if I go 2nd as when I'm playing Zoro, I do just stick Sanji sometimes because he's getting in there for 8 damage in Zoro. In this deck, it can be 8, but typically it's going to be 7 because your leader's just not giving it the free 1k unless you decide to attach a Dawn to it. So yeah, Sanji though, being a 2-drop that hits for 7k on the next turn is a really good value. Then for the next row, looks pretty standard. That 4-drop Brook is really interesting though. I think it's when attacking, give 2 characters minus 2k. I wonder what particular scenario that comes up most of the time. But then we have 4 Shanks. Now that's a lot. I've seen some Zoro lists play 4 Shanks. I've seen some Zoro lists play 0 Shanks. I've seen some play 2. I think there's a lot of varying opinions on this card. There are going to be some times where you stick Shanks and your opponent just can't do anything about it. Every single turn, it's going to turn sideways and just attack them for damage or attack over a body. But sometimes it can just sit dead in your hand. I think 4 is kind of a lot. I'd probably play 2 or 3, but it is a great card for answering 8-drop kid, which, I mean, of course, you already have Otama Jet Pistol, but yeah, it just hits for really big numbers, which is probably pretty helpful in this deck. And then we have for our event card lineup 4 Jet Pistol. I've seen a lot of lists run 3, but 4 is fine too. Just some, fear of kind of clunking up on it, but if they hit Jet Pistol out of your life, that's a really great trigger. Then we have the 4 copies of In 2 Years, so you can search through more of your deck for more of your Straw Hats. And then 1 Radical Beam. So this is our only defensive event card, which is definitely super interesting. This is another 1-cost 4k counter, but you have to be at 2 or less life though. So there is that sort of stipulation. Some players I know just like take all their life down to 2 just so they can use the Radical Beam, but you've only got one Radical Beam in this deck, so that's probably not the strategy this player is going for. This player is probably being a bit more conservative with their life, and then if they just happen to have the Radical Beam later on, they just happen to have it, right? But overall, that's what I've got for this video, 1st through 4th place, as well as the overall room breakdown. Super interesting. I think that the breakdown is interesting, especially when it comes to the number of Dofi in the room. I do wonder if that's gonna be the case in America or not, because again, I love Dofi, but I don't know if it's that strong. But anyways, guys, of course, I want in the comments below what you think about this event. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.